Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and I'm taking care of business. Joining me today is Franco Terrazzano, who is Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Association. Thanks, Franco, for joining us again today.
Hey, thanks for having me on, and it's always fantastic way to pronounce my name.
I love it. I was told a lot of times the double Z is like pizza. All right. So let's talk inflation. How bad is it in Canada these days?
Well, it's bad, and it's tough for many families for sure, right? We just saw Stats Canada's reports more than 5% inflation year over year. So we're looking at a 3 decades high, and that Stats Can report is really just telling us what everyone already knows when they go to the gas pump, when they go to the grocery store. Inflation has really quickly become one of the key economic issues facing Canadians' day-to-day lives, right? We see grocery prices going up, the price of meat, beef, chicken going up, the price of gasoline, it's going up, and it impacts so like a huge part of everyone's lives, right? So this is a very big deal for so many Canadians. And Mario, I would just add, I think one of the frustrations here is that the federal government could immediately provide some relief, help make things a little bit more affordable. But instead, what we see from Ottawa is just piling on the additional costs.
All right. Well, the Taxpayers Federation is calling for tax relief from the federal government. What kind of things can the federal government do specifically to deal with this? In many ways, it's become a crisis for many families, right?
It's really hurting many Canadians, families, people who are already retired, right? People are worried about their bank accounts, their savings accounts, the money that they put towards the retirement as well. So first we have to say, well, what is the government doing to drive inflation? Stop doing that. So there's 3 things that we've been talking about. Number 1, lay off the printing press. We have seen the federal government's central bank print up about 370 billion new dollars, and the more dollars that the central bank prints up, the less that your dollars buy. Yep. Number 2, got to rein in the massive amount of government borrowing, right? We've seen unprecedented amount of government spending. And I think many Canadians are kind of looking around saying, well, how are we going to pay for all of this, right? So added anxiety there. Number 3, of course, the CTF, of course, the Taxpayers Federation has to talk about it, but we have to stop raising taxes during the middle of a pandemic. And we should be seeing the reverse. We should be seeing taxes going down and letting Canadians keep a little bit more of our hard-earned income.
Well, let's talk about taxes in general, right? And obviously there's, the federal level, but we can filter down, right,
yep,
to the provincial levels and the municipal levels of all governments. I'm based in Calgary, and there's no secret how much property taxes, both residential and the commercial side, have gone up. So it's like, and let's face it, right? If you're a business owner in Calgary, you got the double whammy. You got the property increases for your business, and you got property increases for your home. So what role does the provincial and municipal governments have to play in this as well?
Oh, that's such a great point. It's almost like we're getting hit from all angles here, right? Every level of government are coming after us. I'm glad you brought up property taxes, and especially in Calgary, that has been such an issue for so many years now. And property taxes are particularly damaging in this type of downturn, especially for those business owners, right? Because you may have seen your revenue evaporate before your very eyes, but you still have that big property tax bill. Then, of course, when they go home to their family, you open up your mailbox, and then right there is another big property tax hike, courtesy of councillors or your municipal government. The provinces as well. In Alberta, there's bracket creep, right? The sneaky backdoor income tax hike that Premier Jason Kenney brought in, which uses inflation to increase the government's tax take. But then also at the provincial level are gas taxes as well. And when you look at all levels of government, taxes make up about 31 to 42% of the pump price, depending on the province. So one way for all levels of government to provide a little bit of relief would just be to reduce taxes.
So going back to the, going back to the federal level, why is there a reluctance when it comes to taxation, and a reluctance to scale back, and more of a prevalence of seeing the taxes being increased. Is it just because it's easy money and it's while the other way is a tougher way to go?
That's a good question. And I think one of the reasons is that our politicians have just become completely financially divorced from the people that they're supposed to represent. While so many Canadians, millions of Canadians have struggled through the pandemic, especially those in the private sector financially, right? We're talking about so many job losses, so many people who may have lost their business, so many workers who took a pay cut so that they can keep their job. That happened in the private sector. But in Ottawa, we've seen all members of parliament take 2 pay raises during the pandemic. They're scheduled to take their 3rd pandemic pay raise on April 1st. So we have to remember, these politicians, their paychecks keep going up. So the inflation, the cost of living increase, it's not affecting them the way it's affecting their constituents who may have lost their job, their business, or taken a cut.
And that's an interesting point. In all this, when we're talking about taxes and inflation, the problem is wages haven't kept pace over the years for the average citizen, right?
That is a huge issue that we're seeing right now with the inflation. Even Stats Canada had mentioned that as well. And Mario, let's just talk about the struggles that Albertans have been going through. All Canadians have been struggling for the last 2 years with the pandemic, with the revolving government lockdowns. But we have to remember that Albertans had been struggling for 5 years beforehand, right? So, and again, there we see the same trend where you have the federal government making the tough times tougher, right? The federal carbon tax, you had rejecting the Northern Gateway pipeline, moving the goalpost on the Energy East pipeline, the No More Pipelines bill, the discriminatory tanker ban. So I think what's so frustrating for Canadians is that the first rule of government should be to do no harm, but Ottawa is doing harm. Ottawa is making these tough times tougher.
Yeah, very tough times. I'm afraid to open up my utility bill.
Oh man.
I've been seeing horror stories on Twitter and Facebook, et cetera, about people opening up their latest power bill. So it's kind of the case of blind to it. It doesn't exist. Yeah.
Well, and on that, we've been telling a lot of CTF supporters to send your bill to members of parliament, let them know the struggles that you're going through and the higher costs that you're paying. And it's especially important right now because we're actually about to see the carbon tax increase really soon. We're about to see booze taxes increase again really soon. Those taxes are going up April 1. So if you were ever thinking about contacting your member of parliament, now is the perfect time to do that and let them know the struggles that you've been going through and tell them that right now is probably the worst possible time to be raising taxes.
All right, super. Thanks, Franco, for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
All right, super. That's Franco Terrazzano, who is Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. This has been Taking Care of Business. I'm Mario Toneguzzi. Thanks for joining us today.